Welcome back to the Nerd Father. I figured I'd go live today with this because I was trying to figure out how to do a video on this. Um, so I figured it's easier just to do the video live. That way, if anybody's watching live, I can answer questions and stuff like that. But I came across this article this morning from the Religion News Service, which I'll be honest, I've never heard of. But this is an article written by the Jesuit Father Thomas Reese, who unfortunately I have heard of. He is a writer for American Magazine and also the National Catholic Distorter. So, am I really surprised by this idea that he's going to hate the Latin Mass? Nope. But this is his article that he issued calling the future of Catholic liturgical reform. And I wanted to show another article just to let you know how bad this is going to be. Because, whoops. Okay, let's bring up this other article. So I got a few articles I'm going to look at. This is from the Distorter, which I refuse to call it the National Catholic Reporter because it's hardly Catholic, but the same Father Reese 5 years ago, wrote an article basically calling for women deacons. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm not really surprised by this, but anyway, let's go look at the article that Father Reese wrote. Why does it always have to be a Jesuit? Anyway, the future of Catholic liturgical reform, other than sex, nothing is more heatedly debated in the Catholic Church than liturgy. It's kind of interesting that they are mentioning that right now because we pretty much are starting to see a schism form in Germany. Because there's another article I was going to bring up. Let me do that while I have that. I wish StreamYard, which I'm using, would be a little bit easier to switch between windows. So, as you know, I did a video on this last month. I think it was last month. The church affirmed that it does not have the ability to bless same-sex marriages. Because, again, the whole purpose of sex is the unity of the spouses and the procreative aspect, and you cannot separate one from the other. So you cannot bless same-sex marriages. Did the German bishops listen? No. Anyway, they are going to be having a big blessing on May 10th, and I'm going to say it's Bishop Franz Josef Overbeck of Essen said that his priests will face no canonical consequence if they decide to bless gay and lesbian couples in the next month as part of the event Love Wins. Blessing service for lovers. That's nice. So, as it also says that the church cannot do so because God does not bless sin, which we would say same-sex relations are. Not same-sex inclinations, but relations. Cat's shark here. So let's go back to the Father Reese article. Okay, cat shark is getting in the way. So again, this is from Religion News Services. So in the 1960s and 70s, Paul VI, who is now St. Paul VI, I'm surprised he doesn't call him St. Paul VI, implemented revolutionary liturgical reforms laid out by the Second Vatican Council. Honestly, I've read Sacrosanctum Concilium, which is the document on the liturgy from the Second Vatican Council. I don't see where they are calling for this radical revolutionary liturgical reform. Paragraph, let me see if I have it up here. We'll look at it a little bit later. But in paragraph 36, it says, particular law remaining in force, the use of the Latin language is to be preserved in the Latin rites. So, I don't see where he's saying that this is really a radical thing. Anyway, cat shark is in the way again. But after Paul VI's death in 78, the Vatican put stop to the changes. I really don't see that because the missal that we are using now was promulgated in 1970 by Paul VI. And we are still seeing the fruit of that bear out as we are now in the 10th, I think the 10th anniversary of the new translation of the liturgy. But he basically writes in the previous column, I recommended that the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments in Rome update the process by which it considers liturgical questions. Well, fully on you. I argued for more transparency and consultation in keeping with the principle of collegiality promoted by Vatican II and the principle of synodality promoted by Pope Francis. The purpose of a transparent and collegial process is to develop good liturgy that is supported by a consensus within the community. Now, this is where it's going to get fun. He says in this column he's going to offer his ideas on improving liturgy as an attempt to get the conversation going, involving liturgical scholars and others connected to consider my proposals. So, the Roman Rite was developed in Italy and Western Europe. Yeah, that's right. I did my MA thesis on the Roman canon, the formation of the Roman canon, and it actually goes back to about 370, I think it is, with St. Ambrose. The unanswered question is how to carry out enculturation in concrete terms in the liturgy today. Each bishop conference needs to be encouraged to gather scholars, poets, musicians, that's scary, artists, and pastors to develop liturgies for their specific cultures. Again, this is not what Vatican II called for. When the liturgy is out of touch with local culture, it becomes boring and dies. And this is the thing that dumbfounds me, is when the liturgy is out of touch with local culture. Well, part of the thing he wants to do is to do away with the Tridentine Rite, the extraordinary form of the Mass. Well, from my experience, where it's offered, people go to it and they want it. So, but he doesn't like it, so therefore it must go away. Bishops' conferences should discuss whether the new liturgical ministries are needed, whatever that means, and who may be called to perform liturgy. Ooh, there we go. Oh, ho, 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 ho. This is going to be fun. Can the work of liturgy be separated from the work of administration? Do all liturgical leaders have to be celibate, male, full-time employees? Can a deacon or layperson anoint the sick or hear confessions? No. No, they cannot. Even Vatican II basically says as much. In an age of declining number of priests, such questions must be faced. Well, you know what? Look at the places where this type of garbage is being promoted, and that's where the declining number of priests is happening. Dioceses that are solid, that are orthodox, that follow the church, are not suffering from these vocation crises. Look at the religious orders. I posted on Twitter yesterday, Sister Simone Campbell of Nuns on the Bus. She was the one that spoke at the DNC convention. She just retired from her group, and honestly, her order is dying because they are having no vocations. They're dying out. St. Catherine Drexel's order in Philadelphia had to sell their mother house recently because they don't have the vocations and they can't afford to keep it up. But you look at other religious orders like the Nashville Dominicans, the Michigan Dominicans, same order pretty much. Mother Angelica's order. There's orders in my diocese that are very solid. They're growing. My diocese, we have a Carmelite monastery that's cloistered. They actually have too many sisters that they ended up sending about 7 of them out to Harrisburg to form a new religious order out there, and they are pretty much growing too. So, here's where it gets stupid. Ecumenism, whatever. Besides liturgical renewal, Vatican II emphasized improving religion with other Christian churches. Nothing wrong with that. This is where it gets to be wrong. One way to do that is to move our liturgical ceremonies closer together. Is the Eucharist a sign of the existing unity among churches, or can it be used as a means of fostering unity? The former excludes intercommunion, the latter does not. You know what? I want to use words that I can't use because I'm a priest and I don't feel like going to confession, but this is pure stupidity. Uh, I would say outside of maybe the Anglicans, but that's another story too. The majority of Protestants do not recognize the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. I'm wondering if Father Reese affirms that because this is one of the reasons why we do not provide communion to other denominations because we believe that it is truly Jesus Christ that is present in the Eucharist. And unless you're part of the church, you can't receive it. The church might also allow Catholic spouses to share communion if they share faith in the Eucharist. In 2015, a Lutheran asked Pope Francis what she should do at communion when she joins her Catholic husband at Mass. The Pope answered sympathetically but indicated his reluctance to changing church policy. He ended up by saying, "Talk to the Lord and then go forward." Many took this to mean that women should follow her conscience. I don't really remember that. Theologically, if a couple is united in the sacrament of marriage, how can we not allow them to be united at the Eucharist? Again, if you don't believe it's the real presence, then why receive? Pastorally, the practice of barring the non-Catholic parent from communion gives the children the impression that the church thinks their parent is a bad person. Wrong. This is where it's going to get fun. Translations. When he headed the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, Joseph Ratzinger, now Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI, insisted that liturgical texts be translated word for word from the Latin. Experienced translators and liturgical scholars disagreed and considered the resulting English translation woefully inadequate. See, this is why we're on the new translation of the Mass, because the example would be the Gloria, because I'll be honest, when the new translation was implemented, I threw away my old missal, or at least I donated it to the seminary because I didn't want to look at it anymore, because I wanted to do away with the old Mass parts and memorize the new Mass parts. So in the new Mass translation, we say, we praise you, we bless you, we adore you, we glorify you. Laudamus te, benedicimus te, glorificamus te. It's a more faithful translation to the Latin, unlike what was being said before the translation. It is more important that the meaning of the text be communicated clearly than that the translation is to be literal. I would say no, because it's not, one of the things that the Second Vatican Council called for in its liturgy document is full and active participation within the liturgy. And this is one of the reasons why we have the liturgy in the vernacular. As a priest, this is the thing. It's the priest praying the prayers. There's no reason the hierarchy could not allow priests to use the 98 translation as an alternative. Yeah. Allowing the priest to decide which translation works best in his parish. This option would be limited to the priest's prayers at Mass, since it would be too confusing to change the people's responses without extensive preparation. Now here's the heart of the article why I think that Reese is a nut job. Before I froze. My screen froze. So, after the Pauline reforms of liturgy, it was presumed that the Tridentine or Latin Mass would fade away. Bishops were given authority to suppress it in their dioceses, but some people clung to the old liturgy to the point of schism. Benedict took away the bishop's authority and mandated that any priest could celebrate the Tridentine Mass when he pleased, and that is thanks to Sacramentum Caritatis. Pope Benedict issued this letter in 2007, and as I was mentioning to a few, you can see that it's been read a number of times. It's time to return to the bishops the authority over the Tridentine liturgy in their own diocese. The Church needs to be clear that it wants the unreformed liturgy to disappear. Yeah, you don't really give a good reason why. You're not explaining why it needs to be done away with. And I think you're full of baloney. Will only allow it out of pastoral kindness to older people who do not understand the need for change. You know what? People want the old Mass. You seem to be wanting to accommodating other people's wants and desires. Why not this? This is the laughable part. Children and young people should not be allowed to attend such masses. I'll just say I got a bucket of sand and a hammer. Anyway, the Eucharistic prayer is sadly given little attention by the faithful or many priests reciting it. I would say that's not true. Too many focus exclusively on the consecration of the bread and wine. Well, that's the heart of it. I mean, the whole point of the Eucharistic prayer is the transubstantiation that occurs when the bread and wine are transformed into the flesh and blood of Christ. There are currently 13 approved Eucharistic prayers. I'll be honest, I only use 3. I love the Roman Canon, although it is the longest. I use Eucharistic prayer 2, mostly during the weekdays, and sometimes other days too. The Eucharistic prayer 3. Eucharistic prayer 4 is not allowed during Sundays because it has its own preface that goes along with it, and I haven't even touched the others. I did once. My first year as a priest, I did do the Eucharistic prayer for children, and I think the Mass was valid. I had never experienced it before. I hope I did it right. Anyway, the Eucharist developed out of the experience of the Last Supper, which was the Passover meal. As a result, Eucharistic prayers were modeled on the Jewish Passover or Sabbath prayers said by the father or of a family at meal. They began by remembering and giving thanks and praise to God for his actions on behalf of his people. For Jews, this begins with creation and includes God's works recounted in the Old Testament. Like the Passover meal, the Eucharist is a sacrificial meal through which the family is united with God and one another. You know what? I'm gonna probably say 5 will get you 10. That he doesn't even talk about the holy sacrifice of the Mass, making the present again the one-time sacrifice of Jesus on the cross that becomes present again during the Mass. It's also an opportunity to remember and renew their covenant with God. We give thanks to God for his action through history, especially for Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, and promise to come again. Through the Eucharist, we renew our covenant with the Father through Christ. More importantly, more important than the transformation of the bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ is the transformation of the community into the body of Christ. Oh, this is baloney. Major time baloney. There was a paper back home had Father Richard McBrien's weekly column in it, and I still remember it from 20, 30 years ago that he wrote that Jesus left us the Eucharist to be eaten, not adored. That seems to be falling into this mindset here. Anyway, and as I'm doing this, I got the Prince Philip's funeral in the background. It's playing again on Sky News. Anyway, we do not worship with Jesus in this sense. We worship with Jesus. We worship the Father and ask to be transformed by the power of the Spirit into the body of Christ. Wow. The Church needs more and better Eucharistic prayers based on our renewed understanding of the Eucharist. No. It would be nice to have Eucharistic prayers that use more biblical language. When the Gospel reading is from Luke, the priest could use the Eucharistic... Oh. This guy's a nut. A unique preface for each Sunday that picked up the themes from the scriptural readings could also tie the liturgy of the Word and the liturgy of the Eucharist more closely together. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Figuring there's, about 27 weeks of ordinary time times 3 for all the 3-year cycle. I suck at math, but I'm thinking if you did that, that's going to be at least 200 extra prefaces. I hate to think what the missal would cost. Other Eucharistic prayers might develop other themes. The church is concerned for the poor, for justice, for peace, healing, and the environment. Well, you know what? We have mass settings, mass prayers for those already. In the back of the missal, there are like 30 different options for mass intention, or for the why the mass is being offered. On the day that Biden was sworn in, I did mass for peace and harmony in the country. Originally, the Kiss of Peace occurred at the conclusion of the Liturgy of the Word, where it symbolized the agreement of the community to commit itself to what it had heard in the Scriptures. With proper explanation, it would be a good idea to provide this ancient practice as an optional alternative to its placing before communion. You know what? I haven't done the Sign of Peace in a year and a half. I'm fine with that. It gets to be too chaotic. Oh dear. After the Lord's Prayer, the priest breaks off a piece of the host and drops it into the cup. In ancient times, bishops instead sent this piece, called the fermentum, to parishes in their diocese whose pastor would put it in their chalices as a symbol of communion. The practice could be revived during Holy Week, when the bishop could send the fermentum from Chrism Mass in Holy Week for pastors to drop into their chalices on Holy Thursday or Easter Sunday. Oh, dear heavens. You know, when I do sick calls and I take the Eucharist with me, I do not have the radio on, because believing in the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist, I don't think that there should be noises. It's a time to pray. I live 4 hours from our cathedral where the Chrism Mass takes place. I'll just leave it at that. The Pope could share fermentum with bishops around the world who would place it in their chalices. What are you going to do? Send Jesus in the mail? As ecumenical relations improve, the Pope might share the fermentum with the ecumenical patriarch or other Christian bishops. Yeah, I doubt I will see many of these reforms in my lifetime. They're never going to happen. But we need to begin talking about the future of liturgical reform. The conversation will reveal what we think about Christ, the Church, and our place in the world. What a load of garbage this article is. Let's see. We got Miss Martin Muses. Good to see ya. Yeah, so this Sonata Pupis, one of the things for myself, I know Odin would disagree. As a priest, I like knowing the words that I'm praying, because English is my first language. If I had a working comprehension of Latin, then I could actually pray the Old Mass. I actually would like to learn the Old Mass. But the problem is, as you can tell from my streams, anything over 2-3 syllables gets to be a little tricky for me at times. So, Chris P., good to see you. So that was just going to lead me into this other thing. I was just digging out other books. Let me bring up the full screen again. So this article made me start digging up books from when I did my master's on the history of the Roman canon. This is one of the first books I probably bought. It's probably been 10 years since I opened it. The Early Liturgy by Joseph Jungmann, who is a Jesuit and was a good Jesuit when Jesuits were good. This was written back in 62, talking about the liturgy up until the time of Gregory the Great. And it was around the time of Gregory the Great that the prayers became universal, uniformed and universal. One of the other books that I dug up is Wedding Feast of the Lamb. This is written by Hildenbrand Books. Eucharistic Theology from a Historical, Biblical, and Systematic Perspective. When the new translation of the Mass came out, we had a priest study day where these two people who wrote Encountering Christ in the Words of the Mass, and this is a book, as you can tell, that has been greatly used over the few years. I've marked it up pretty good, but this book really helped me dive into what it is that I'm doing when I say Mass. Then there's the older books, and these are ones I just hung on because I really don't want to get rid of them, even though I probably haven't used them in 10, 13 years. But these are a 2 volume set, basically the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass, dogmatically, liturgically, and aesthetically explained. So these books were written by Nicholas Gear, and oh, that's volume 2. Let's see. It does not have a printing date. It was probably back in the 50s. So, Latin can be difficult. I haven't worked with it for a long time. I'd be lost now. So yeah, I have been to the Tridintine Mass a number of times before I was ordained a priest. I believe it's a very beautiful liturgy. I've come across many priests from the Fraternity of St. Peter, the FSSP, which was the order that stayed in union with Rome, unlike the SSPX, which is currently in schism, and depending on who you talk to, they would debate that they're not in schism, but they broke away. I mean, Lefebvre ordained bishops without the permission of the Pope, and that's a thing that's has the automatic penalty of excommunication. Anyway, so with that, I think I'm going to wrap up because I still have Mass this evening. I still got to print my bulletins. But I just wanted to kind of do a fun review. Also, as I was mentioning too, this is the Sacrament of Charity, Sacramentum Caritatis, by Pope Benedict XVI, which came out in 2007. Great book. I would say a prayer for Father Reese. He's nuts, but heaven help the people he works with. So that's it. Thanks for joining me. Be sure to hit the like button and hit the ring bell so you can be notified when new videos go live or whenever I decide to live stream. So until next time, God bless.